There was a time when a car was not just a machine. It was a statement. A moving piece of art built by hands that genuinely cared about every single detail. The 1960s in Britain produced some of the most breathtaking luxury cars the world has ever seen, and honestly, most of them put today's so-called luxury vehicles to shame. We are talking about hand-stitched leather, walnut wood dashboards, and ride quality that felt like floating on clouds. If you love automotive history and timeless elegance, you are in the right place. Make sure you subscribe to Britain Rewind so you never miss stories like this. Now, let us start with number 10, and trust me, this one is already underrated. Number 10. Armstrong Siddeley Star Sapphire. Most people have completely forgotten this car exists, and that is honestly a tragedy. The Armstrong Siddeley Star Sapphire, produced between 1958 and 1960, was one of the final masterpieces from a brand that poured its entire soul into craftsmanship. It sat at the very top of British luxury in its era, and every inch of it showed that. The interior was finished with deep wool carpeting, hand-polished walnut veneer, and leather so soft it almost felt wrong to sit on it. But here is what made it even more remarkable. It came with an automatic gearbox at a time when most luxury cars were still asking drivers to shift manually. The exterior carried a quiet, dignified presence that never screamed for attention but always commanded it. Can you imagine how rare and precious one of these feels today? This was craftsmanship at its most sincere, and it deserves far more recognition than it gets. Number 9. Bristol F5B. Now this is where things get really interesting. The Bristol F5B, introduced in 1963, was not a car built for the masses. It was built for a very specific kind of person, someone who understood quality at a level most people never reach. Bristol Cars was originally an aircraft manufacturer, and that obsession with engineering precision translated directly into every car they made. The F5B used an American V8 engine paired with a body that was aerodynamically refined and visually understated in the most elegant way possible. The cabin was a sanctuary. Deep leather seats, beautifully integrated instrumentation, and a driving position that felt almost ceremonial. But the most interesting part is that Bristol never advertised their cars. Not once. You had to know about them to own one. That exclusivity made them legendary among those who truly appreciated rare, handcrafted British luxury, and the F5B remains one of the finest examples of that philosophy. Number 8. Alvis TE21. Some cars age beautifully, and then there is the Alvis TE21, which somehow looks even more stunning today than it did when it first arrived in 1963. Built in collaboration with the Swiss coach builder Hermann Graber, this car carried a continental European elegance that was almost unheard of in British manufacturing at the time. The long bonnet, the sweeping roofline, and those perfectly proportioned chrome details gave it the kind of visual balance that modern designers spend years trying to achieve. Step inside and you were greeted by handcrafted leather upholstery and a wooden dashboard that looked more like fine furniture than automotive interior. And one detail about this car changed everything. Alvis offered it in both drophead and saloon form, meaning you could have open-air grand touring with full luxury on board. Very few cars today even come close to that combination of beauty and bespoke quality. Would this still turn heads now? Absolutely, without question. Number 7. Daimler Majestic Major. The Daimler Majestic Major carries a name that sounds almost royal, and honestly, the car lived up to every letter of it. Launched in 1960, this was Daimler's flagship saloon, and it was built with the kind of confidence that only comes from decades of producing cars for the British establishment. Under the bonnet sat a 4.5-litre V8 engine that gave it surprisingly brisk performance for something so large and dignified. But performance was never really the point. The point was presence. When a Majestic Major pulled up outside a hotel or a government building, people noticed. The interior featured deeply padded leather seating, picnic tables for rear passengers, and enough wood trim to feel genuinely palatial. Most people have completely forgotten how significant this car was in its time. It was not just transport. It was a rolling expression of post-war British confidence, and that feeling still comes through every time you see one. Number 6. Rover P5B. Here is a car that literally sat in the British Prime Minister's garage for years, and if that does not tell you everything about its status, nothing will. The Rover P5B, refined throughout the 1960s and fitted with a BIC-derived V8 engine, became the definitive British executive saloon of the era. It was used by the royal family, by cabinet ministers, and by anyone who needed to travel with absolute authority and quiet dignity. The coupe version, with its lower roofline and more swept-back silhouette, was genuinely one of the most handsome cars of the entire decade. Inside, the combination of Connolly leather and Wilton carpeting made every journey feel like a private occasion. But what really set it apart was the way it drove. Smooth, composed, unhurried, yet completely in control. This was a car that understood its role perfectly, and it fulfilled it with effortless grace every single time. Number 5. Jensen Interceptor. Now we step into Grand Touring territory, and the Jensen Interceptor arrives like it has something to prove. Introduced in 1966 with coachwork designed by the Italian firm Carrozzeria Touring, the Interceptor was a bold, confident, almost aggressive departure from the typically reserved world of British luxury. That massive wraparound rear glass panel was unlike anything else on British roads at the time, and it gave the car a silhouette that people genuinely stopped to stare at. Beneath that dramatic body was a large American Chrysler V8, giving it the kind of effortless power that matched its looks perfectly. The interior was draped in leather and thick carpeting, with a level of finish that justified every penny of its considerable price tag. And here is the most interesting part. The Interceptor was both a sports car and a luxury car at the same time, a combination that almost no manufacturer managed to get right in that era. Jensen absolutely nailed it. Number 4. Aston Martin DB6. There are iconic cars, and then there is the Aston Martin DB6. Launched in 1965, it refined everything that made the DB5 famous and added a level of maturity and sophistication that elevated it even further. The aerodynamics were improved, the cabin was made more comfortable for longer journeys, and the overall package felt more resolved, more confident, and more complete. The straight-six engine sang in a way that no modern turbocharged unit ever quite replicates, and the handling was sharp enough to remind you that this was not just a beautiful object but a genuinely capable machine. But the real reason it stood out was something most people missed. The DB6 was designed to be used. Not just admired in a showroom or preserved under a cover, but actually driven hard and enjoyed. The leather and wood interior only look better with age, and that philosophy of purposeful luxury is something the modern automotive world has almost entirely lost. Number 3. Jaguar MarkX. Jaguar in the 1960s was doing something that no other British manufacturer was quite managing, producing genuinely world-class luxury at a price that felt almost unreasonably accessible. The MarkX, later renamed the 420G, was the largest saloon Jaguar ever built, and it arrived in 1961 with the kind of low-slung, wide-bodied presence that turned heads on both sides of the Atlantic. The interior was legendary. For deeply cushioned leather seats, a dashboard covered in polished walnut veneer, and more interior space than many of its much more expensive rivals. The independent rear suspension gave it a ride quality that contemporary critics compared favorably to Rolls-Royce, which was an almost unbelievable claim at the time. Can you imagine owning something like this today? A car that combined genuine size, genuine comfort, and genuine style in a package that felt completely effortless. That is exactly what the MarkX delivered, and it remains deeply underappreciated by those who do not know their British automotive history. Number 2. Bentley TSeries. The Bentley TSeries arrived in 1965 and represented one of the most significant moments in the brand's post-war history. It was the first Bentley to use a fully integrated steel monocoque body, abandoning the traditional separate chassis construction that had defined the brand for decades. That might sound like a technical footnote, but what it meant in practice was a car that was lighter, more rigid, and more refined than anything Bentley had produced before. The interior remained an exercise in absolute luxury, with hand-stitched leather, deep pile carpeting, and a dashboard of beautifully grained walnut that no modern material can honestly replicate. The ride was serene, the power was effortless, and the visual presence of the car was one of restrained, aristocratic authority. What happened next surprised even the buyers who had owned Bentleys for years. They simply could not believe how good this new direction felt. The T-Series proved that evolution, when done with real care and intent, can be just as powerful as revolution. Number 1. Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow. And here we are at number 1, and there was never really any other choice. The Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow, introduced in 1965, was not just the most luxurious British car of the 1960s. It was arguably the most luxurious car in the entire world at the time, and very few cars in the decades since have genuinely surpassed what it offered. Like the Bentley T-Series, it adopted a monocoque construction and independent suspension on all four corners, giving it a ride quality that felt almost supernatural. The interior was a private world of the finest leather, hand-finished wood veneers, and details so carefully considered that every single journey felt like a special occasion. But the most extraordinary thing about the Silver Shadow was its quiet confidence. It never needed to announce itself. The moment it appeared, everyone already knew. That is a level of presence that no amount of technology or marketing can manufacture, and it is why the Silver Shadow remains the definitive symbol of 1960s British luxury even today. And there you have it! 10 British luxury cars from the 1960s that remind us of a time when elegance was not just a feature but a philosophy. When craftsmen spent hours on a single piece of wood veneer, when leather was chosen by hand, and when a car was built to make you feel something the moment you stepped inside. These were not just vehicles. They were expressions of a culture that believed deeply in doing things properly. In a world of screens, synthetic materials, and algorithmically designed interiors, that kind of intention feels almost radical today. So let me ask you this. If you could own just one of these 10 cars, which one would you choose? Drop your answer in the comments below. I genuinely want to know. If you enjoyed this journey through Britain's most elegant automotive era, please give this video a like and subscribe to Britain Rewind. There is so much more history waiting for you right here.